We've got about 10 minutes now for questions, and we have a number of questions ready to go. We're going to start with one from Prince Rupert, I think. It may not be from Prince Rupert, from the webcast anyhow. You mentioned the Fish and Game Commission, I think, accepted something close to what the task force and stakeholders had recommended. Was the difference controversial? Was this difference controversial once announced? Did the stakeholders feel let down? Did the agencies did not heed the advice?
I don't believe that the stakeholders felt let down. I think that the changes that were made were certainly within the scope of the alternatives that had been presented, and they weren't major differences. They were more adjustments than anything. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, and our next question is from table 4, and then it'll be table 16. Was there a question at table 4? Ah.
Hi, my name is Fred Fellman, Northwest Consultant for Friends of the Earth, and neither of you spoke of, well, the stakeholders of having to deal with First Nations or tribal governments of the United States, which is a big issue in the Northwest and clearly in this audience, and was wondering if you could speak to whether you had interest from Indigenous people. And the biggest concern I've heard in the Northwest and working on the Olympic Coast has been the desire to pursue MPAs prior to identifying what the problem the MPA was to address. And that I just was wondering whether you came out with this initial problem statement and how this type of solution addressed that problem.
Good questions. As I mentioned earlier, I found this meeting to be very enriching, particularly because I've been able to experience and hear the voices of First Nations. And I've been so impressed by that. We in California have, in some areas of the state, such as the North, a number of First Nations. In the Klamath River Valley, for instance, the Yurok and the Kuruk are both very, very important players. And as the MLPA process goes to the north, there's going to be a special effort to engage them, and that's already underway. Down where I live in Southern California, there are no treaty tribes, but there are a number of communities, the Tongva and the Chumash, for instance, and there's been a special effort made to pull together them together with others in the region to make sure that their concerns are brought into the regional stakeholder process. There is a member of the Chumash on the regional stakeholder group. So on the Central Coast and the North Central Coast, there was really no experience with that. So as I said, I found this experience to be very enriching because it's a very, very important part of the picture for us, and we're doing our best to support engagement. As for why MPAs, that is a question that's come up in the MLPA initiative, and my short answer to that is it's because it's a law. And the legislature decided not so much that it was, it's partly it was addressing a problem, but it was more that the legislature thought that there was a need to establish some areas for the restoration of fisheries, of biodiversity, for study sites. So it was more along those lines. So we've taken it as more a matter of implementing a policy that's already settled. So it's, but certainly understand, and there are continuing discussions why MPAs and whatnot, and those are important discussions, but the state law really directs the creation of this network.
Table 16 is next, and then table 11 has a question.
Yeah, my question is on your MPA implementation, and you didn't set out with specific goals in mind, but and you've got square miles as the how you break it down, but we tend to work in percentages here, defined areas, and I just wonder what the percentage of your 1,100-mile coastline ended up being set aside as an MPA, and of that, what percentage fell within the third classification, which was your no-take zones?
First of all, we've only done one region completely. The second region is almost complete. So in the Central Coast, the marine protected areas as a total represent 18% of state waters. Of that, 9% is in marine reserve. On the North Central Coast, the percentage is 20% for all marine protected areas and 11% for marine reserves. But I want to emphasize that in the second area, the percentages are really unknown because the Fish and Game Commission has not made a final decision. That is the preferred alternative that they are considering. So we will have to see what happens in Southern California and Northern California. And there is no target for a certain percentage. The design of the network is really driven by other considerations that are in the science guidelines that I mentioned earlier.
Great. Table 11's next, and then Table 20.
Yes, thank you. Des Nobles, T-Buck Suzuki Environmental Foundation. I'm wondering if you could share your annual budget with us. What were the costs, and if possible, what you're looking at for total costs once you're finished the initiative?
Okay. For the initiative, and that's the Blue Ribbon Task Force, the Regional Stakeholder Group, the Science Advisory Team, all the supporting consultants, the meetings and whatnot, in the first phase, which was the development of the Master Plan Framework, which took about 9 months, and then the pilot project on the Central Coast, the budget was about $7.5 million over 2.5 years. The Central Coast budget is running about around $4 million. Southern California is going to be a little more expensive. It's bigger. There are more people. And I would expect that'll be about 4.5. So by the time the North Coast is completed, I expect that the total process will have cost about $19 million.
Okay. Thanks. Table 20 and then Table 3, and I think that's all the time we'll have.